I have been a carpenter for 38 years. I built things that lasted. Decks, cabinets, staircases, the kind of work you can put your hand on 20 years later and still feel solid. I raised 3 kids in a 4-bedroom house in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I built most of that house myself. The back porch, the bookshelves in the living room, the window seat in my daughter's room where she used to sit and read on Sunday mornings. I built all of it with my own hands, and I thought that meant something. My wife, Carol, passed 8 years ago. Breast cancer, caught late. After she went, it was just me in that house, and for a while the kids were good about checking in. My oldest son drove up from Atlanta a few times a year. My daughter called every Sunday without fail. My younger son lived only 40 minutes away in Maryville, and he'd stop by on his way through, fix things that needed fixing, stay for dinner. That was then. Last spring, my doctor found a mass in my colon. Not the worst kind of news, he said. Caught early enough. But it meant surgery, and it meant recovery, and it meant I was going to need help for a while. I'm 67 years old and I live alone. I can't drive myself home from a surgery. I can't lift things for 3 weeks. I can't do a lot of things I've been doing without thinking about them my whole life. I told my kids at Easter. We were all together for the first time in almost 2 years, sitting around the same table Carol used to set, and I told them straight. No dramatics, just the facts. What the doctor said, what the plan was, what the recovery would look like. My daughter put her fork down. My older son looked at the table. My younger son said, "Dad, we've got you. Don't even worry about it." They worked it out right there at the table. My younger son would be at the hospital the morning of the surgery and would stay that first night. My daughter would drive up from Charlotte and take the second and third days. My older son would come from Atlanta and cover the rest of the first week. After that, I'd be mobile enough to manage on my own, but they'd check in daily, and one of them would come up each weekend for the first month. I wrote it down in my notebook, not because I didn't trust them. I wrote it down because it felt real, because I wanted to be able to look at it, because I had 3 kids who loved me and I was going to be okay. The surgery was scheduled for a Tuesday in late April. On the Monday before, my younger son called. He sounded tired. He said there was a situation at work. A roof job that had gone sideways, a client who was threatening to pull out of the contract, and if he didn't show up personally to deal with it, the whole thing could fall apart. He said he was really sorry. He said he'd make it up to me. He said my daughter would be there in the morning, so I wouldn't be alone. I said, okay, I understood. These things happen. I called my daughter that night to give her the update. She already knew. He had texted her. She said, "I've got you, Daddy. I'll be there by 7. I didn't sleep well. That happens before surgery. You lie there and think about all the things that could go wrong, and then you think about all the reasons they won't, and then you think about them anyway. I thought about Carol. I thought about how she used to hold my hand in waiting rooms. I got up at 4:30 and made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table and looked at my notebook. The hospital was 40 minutes away. I drove myself because what else was I going to do? I checked in, changed into the gown, got the IV started. The nurse was a young woman named Patricia who had a red braid down her back and a no-nonsense way of moving through the room that I appreciated. She asked me who would be picking me up after. I told her my daughter was coming. She said, "Good. You'll want someone here when you wake up." My daughter texted at 6:58. "Leaving now. Traffic is bad. Might be a few minutes late, but I'll be there." The surgery was at 8. They wheeled me back at 7:45. When I came out of anesthesia, the room was quiet. Afternoon light through the blinds. Patricia was checking something on a monitor. I turned my head slowly because everything hurt, and I looked at the chair next to my bed. Empty. I asked Patricia what time it was. She said 3:15. I asked if anyone had come. She looked at me for a second before she answered. She said no one had checked in at the desk for me, but that she would find out if someone was in the waiting room. She came back a few minutes later. No one was in the waiting room. I looked at my phone. There were 2 texts from my daughter. The first one, sent at 9:42, said there had been an accident on I-40, and traffic was completely stopped. The second one, sent at 11:15, said, "Dad, I'm so sorry. Emma has a fever and I had to turn around. She's at 103. I can't leave her. Please call me when you're awake. Emma is my granddaughter. She is 6 years old. A fever of 103 in a 6-year-old is not nothing. I know that." I texted back that I understood. I asked her to keep me posted on Emma. She sent a string of heart emojis. I texted my older son. "Surgery went fine. At the hospital. Your sister couldn't make it. Are you still planning to come this week?" He called about an hour later. He said he'd seen my text. He said he was sorry about my daughter not making it. He said the plan was still to come Wednesday. That was the original plan. He hadn't changed anything. I said, okay. I said that was good. He came on Wednesday for about 4 hours. He brought a 6-pack of Dos Equis and a rotisserie chicken from Kroger. And we watched a baseball game, and he told me about his job and his girlfriend's renovation project and a guy from his gym who had done something funny. He was good company. He always has been. At 9:30, he said he needed to get back because he had an early call on Thursday morning. I watched him walk out. My younger son called Thursday. He said the roof job had worked out, thank God. He said he was planning to come Saturday. I said that was fine. Saturday came and went. I texted him Sunday morning. He responded Sunday night. Something had come up. He'd explain when he saw me. He'd definitely come the following weekend. I had been home from the hospital for 6 days at that point. I had driven myself home in a cab on Wednesday morning because the hospital needed the bed and my son's 4-hour visit didn't count as a pickup. I had walked in the front door of my house alone and stood in the kitchen for a while before I sat down. Everything was quiet. There was a pile of mail on the counter that I hadn't touched. There was a dish in the sink from the morning before my surgery, a coffee mug I hadn't washed because I'd been in a hurry, and looking at it made me feel something I don't have a good word for. I couldn't lift things. I couldn't drive. I could shuffle around the house and heat up soup and sit in my recliner and watch television. My neighbor Helen, 73 years old and recovering from a knee replacement herself, brought me a casserole the second day I was home. She knocked on the door and handed it to me and said, "I figured nobody else was doing this." She said it kindly. She wasn't making a point. But I heard it. The following Sunday, my daughter called. It was her regular Sunday call, same as always, same time slot. She asked how I was feeling. I said I was getting stronger. She asked if I was eating. I said Helen had brought food. There was a pause, and she said, "Helen? Your neighbor Helen?" I said, "Yes." Another pause. She said, "Oh, Dad," I asked about Emma. Emma was fine, had been fine since the day after the surgery, just a 24-hour thing. I said I was glad. We talked for 22 minutes. I know because I looked at my phone when the call ended. It was a pleasant conversation. She asked if I needed anything. I said I was managing. She said she'd try to come up in a few weeks when things settled down. My older son texted twice that week, nice texts, checking in, asking how I was feeling. I wrote back each time that I was doing okay. My younger son didn't contact me again for 11 days. When he did call, he was cheerful. He'd been busy. The business was really picking up. He talked for a while about a big commercial job he'd landed, and I listened, and I said that was great, and I meant it. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time. I had a cup of coffee that got cold while I was sitting there. Outside the window, the yard needed mowing, and I wasn't going to be able to do it for at least another week. And I thought about how many times I had mowed that yard with my kids running through the sprinklers, and how many times I had pulled out the mower at 7 in the morning on a Saturday, because Carol liked the lawn to look neat, and how I had done it without thinking, just because it was mine to do, because taking care of things was what you did. I had given each of my kids $20,000 when they turned 30. I wasn't a wealthy man, but I had saved carefully, and I wanted to help them get started. I had helped my older son with the down payment on his first apartment. I had driven 14 hours round trip to help my younger son move into his first house. I had sat with my daughter through 2 miscarriages before Emma was born, and I had held her hand the same way Carol used to hold mine. I'm not saying this to keep score. I didn't help them to be owed. I helped them because they were my children, and that's what fathers do. But I started to understand something during those weeks alone in that house. There's a difference between people who love you and people who show up. Those two groups overlap more than you'd think when everyone is healthy and busy and everything is fine. It's only in the specific moments, the ones that require something from you, that you find out which group you're actually in. I called my attorney in the 3rd week. His name is Gerald, and I've known him for 20 years, since he handled the closing on my house. He's a careful man, unhurried, the kind of lawyer who makes you feel like nothing is an emergency even when it is. I asked him if we could update my will. He said of course. We scheduled a meeting. I also started looking into something I'd been putting off. There's a senior community out past Farragut, nice place, not a nursing home, more like apartments with shared amenities and people your own age and someone who checks on you. I had driven past it 100 times over the years and thought, not for me. I'm in my own home. I built that porch myself, but I went and toured it. A woman named Diane showed me around. Garden plots. A woodworking shop. They actually had a woodworking shop. A dining room that felt like a restaurant, not an institution. People my age sitting outside in the afternoon sun talking. I had coffee with a man named Roy who had moved in 2 years ago after his wife passed, and he said the thing he hadn't expected was how much he didn't miss being alone in a big house. I thought about that. I didn't make any decisions that day. But I went back the following week and asked for the paperwork. My daughter called on a Sunday in mid-June, same time slot. She started talking about her summer plans, and then she stopped herself. She said, "Dad, I feel really bad about not being there when you had surgery. I want you to know that." I said I appreciated that. She said Emma had really been sick. I said I knew. She said, "Are you okay? You sound different." I said I was fine. I said I'd been doing a lot of thinking. There was a long pause. She said, "About what?" I told her I was looking at some changes. I told her I had updated my will. I didn't go into specifics, but I told her I had thought carefully about who had shown up in my life and made my choices accordingly. I told her I was also considering the senior community out by Farragut, that I'd toured it twice and liked it, and that I was thinking about putting the house on the market in the fall. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Dad, are you serious?" I said I was. She called her brothers. I know because my older son called me an hour later. And he wasn't angry, just careful, the way people get when they realize something has changed and they're not sure by how much. He said he hoped I wasn't making decisions based on what happened with the surgery. I said I was making decisions based on everything, the surgery included. My younger son came that weekend. First visit since the 4-hour dinner with the chicken and the beer. He sat across the kitchen table and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen from him since he was a teenager, and knew he'd done something he couldn't talk his way out of. He said he was sorry. He said he hadn't realized. He said the business had been insane, and he hadn't thought through what it meant that he wasn't showing up. I said, I knew he hadn't thought through it. That was sort of the point. He asked if it was too late to fix it. I said I didn't know. I said I wasn't angry. I said what I was clear. I told him I had learned something about myself during those weeks, that I didn't need to be surrounded by people, but I needed to know that the people in my life would be there when it counted. I told him I wasn't sure yet what that meant going forward, but I was going to make choices that protected that. He left that evening and the house was quiet again. I made myself dinner, a chicken breast and some green beans, simple. The kind of meal Carol always complained was too plain. I sat at the table where we had eaten 10,000 dinners together, and I looked out the window at the yard, and I thought about Roy at the senior community, saying he didn't miss being alone in a big house. I understood what he meant now. I don't know what the next chapter looks like exactly. I've put the house on the market. I've put a deposit down at the Farragut community, and I move in the 1st of September. The woodworking shop has a bandsaw I've been thinking about since the day I toured it. Gerald has the updated will. It says what it needs to say. My kids are not bad people. Want to be clear about that. They are busy people who got comfortable with the fact that I had always been fine. That is a different thing. I spent 38 years building things that lasted, and I spent a lot of years being the kind of father who was always there. Maybe I was so reliable that they forgot reliability could run in both directions. I'm not bitter. Bitterness would require me to keep caring what they do with it, and I've stopped doing that. What I am is awake, in a way I haven't been in years. I wake up in the morning now, and I make my plans, and I think about what I want the next stretch of my life to look like. And for the first time in a long time, I'm the only one I have to check with. The eggs I make every Saturday morning are better than the ones at any diner I've ever been to. I eat them slow. I drink my coffee while it's still hot. I look out the window at the yard I'll be leaving behind, and I don't feel sad about it the way I thought I would. I feel ready.